Hello and welcome to another episode of BioTalk, a kind of special episode. With me today is Stacy Trasancos. She is a stay-at-home mom in New York with a background in chemistry and theology. And we've been, good friends online for a while, working with each other on different websites. Today we're going to talk about what everybody's calling the Planned Parenthood controversy, but as we're going to kind of talk about a little bit, it's a little bit more than a Planned Parenthood controversy. And Stacy, why don't we just start with, these videos started coming out. I mean, I assume most of the listeners know what we're talking about, but the Center for Medical Progress videos, the undercover videos of Planned Parenthood executives talking about selling fetal baby parts and things. And so these videos started coming out, and you started noticing something that people weren't talking about, or kind of something that was missing in the conversation.
Yeah, my entrance into this conversation, because I don't always write about the abortion issue. I'm obviously very passionate about that, but I don't always write about that topic. But my entrance into this conversation with the Planned Parenthood videos recently from the Center for Medical Progress was, I realized how appalling it was to everyone to hear about the organs of the fetuses from abortion being used in medical research. And I was like raising my hand in the social media. I was like, but something that I really think everybody needs to understand is these are but strokes on a broader canvas. This is just part of the story. This is nothing new. This has been going on. And I mean, just to kind of give you my personal view on it, when these videos started coming out in July 14th, just the week before, July 3rd, I had been sitting down reading Science magazine, which is, I call it the most prestigious scientific journal to get published in. Maybe that one and Nature, both are very prestigious. But anyway, I subscribe to it because it's on the cutting edge of research going on throughout the world. And just a week and a half before the videos came out from the Center for Medical Progress, I was reading the Science magazine, and it was talking about studies they had done using aborted fetal tissues. In that case, it was to determine something about evolution, which genes in the human brain, or which genes had been responsible for causing the human brain to grow larger. They had taken those genes out of tissue from an aborted fetus, or several, and put them into mice to see what it would do to the mouse brains, and it caused them to get bigger. And so this goes on all the time. I mean, if you immerse yourself in the scientific literature and follow it, it is nothing new. And so yes, it's horrifying, but it's not like they just started doing this. The problem runs wider, deeper, and vaster than it would seem at first, just looking at those videos.
So do you want to share like some of the stuff that you found? I know you pulled up your articles for some names, like some of the stuff that you've found, like, what is out there? What are they doing with these?
What are they doing? Mm-hmm. There have been a number of different types of research projects. Like back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, they took the tissues. They would take the organ and chop it up and put the tissues into other animals, and even for Parkinson's disease, they would put it into actual patients. They actually described experiments where they had the abortion in one room and the Parkinson's patients prepared in the next room, and they would take the fresh tissue, brain tissue, and put it into, I think it was the armpits of the Parkinson's patients, and they were trying to cause new cells to grow. And they followed these patients for decades, and they actually did see improvements in their symptoms. And then there are papers following that where once those Parkinson's patients died, they dissected their bodies and analyzed the tissue as well. There were also some experiments in the 90s where they were taking the ovaries from female aborted babies and harvesting the eggs. They've been trying to see if they could freeze them so that infertile couples would have another source of eggs to use. There was actually a huge ethical controversy about should fetuses be mothers. And
wow.
in a crazy sense of irony, that one ethicist even asked the question, it wouldn't be fair to have the fetus be a mother since the fetus couldn't give consent. Never mind the fetus didn't consent to being killed.
Right.
But, I mean, it's just crazy reasoning. And that kind of went away because of public outcry on the ethics of it. It just kind of went away, and people realized you don't need to harvest eggs from fetuses. You could just harvest females' eggs. And so that issue, I think, is pretty much dead now. The transplanting issue there was a moratorium on it in the United States for a while, but it was brought back in 2014. So that's still ongoing research. So when you hear of the humanized mice, or of mice and men, as the scientific literature likes to put it, that's where they're taking human organs, chopping them up, and putting the cells into mice to see if they can grow. So they want to do some tests on those mice to see how certain medications affect human cells. And then another piece of research I found and wrote about and got, it is extreme, and that's one reason I put it out there, is because it's, again, the truth of things. In 1972, there was a paper published in Pediatric Research Journal. It was 2 New York researchers and 1 Finnish researcher from Finland. And what they had done, what caught my attention in that paper was the description of in vivo experiments. In vivo means within the living. Okay, and so they were talking about experiments done on fetuses, and I use the word fetus because that's what they use. They were doing experiments on fetuses that were still alive, and they were measuring how a fetus's body processes amino acids, because they were trying to determine what essential amino acids were to a prematurely born child, so they could develop infant formulas that would meet the needs of a prematurely born child. And so the experiments they did in Finland, although they were funded by US dollars, they were funded by a private group in New York and by a government group in New York, and also by another private group in Boston. In Finland, then, in a women's hospital, they set up the experiments. It said they used 58 different fetuses. I don't know how many times they did this type of experiment, but they did a hysterotomy, which is a C-section. They cut the mother's, she's unconscious, anesthetized. They cut open her abdomen, cut open the uterus, lifted the child out, and then they injected amino acid that they were testing into, into the umbilical cord. And then what they did in the in vivo experiment was basically use the child still attached to the mother as a living biological machine. And they timed it for 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. And they report in the paper, quoting, that the heart was still beating throughout the 10-minute period and the child was moving. Excuse me, my children gave me a cold.
That's okay.
And then after 10 minutes, it just says in the paper, after 10 minutes, the body was dissected, the brain and the heart were put into, I think it was not the heart, the kidney and the brain were put into liquid nitrogen to freeze them for further analysis. Mm-hmm. And so the in vivo experiment was done with the mother laying there with her womb wide open, the child mm-hmm. out, attached, and processing these amino acids for 10 minutes, and then they kill the child, take the organs out, and freeze them, and sew the mother back up. And it's described, it's in the paper that you published on Catholic Lane. It's described in detail. That's what they did. Mm-hmm. And, for infant formula, the Finnish researcher went on to do his research for another decade or so. And then in the 90s, 1993, he was employed by Nestle Corporation to edit the book of the proceedings of one of their annual meetings about infant formula. It's not, think about it too. I like to make this point because they didn't say anything about it in the paper. But if abortion is supposed to be safe for the mother, as safe as possible for the mother, mm-hmm. It is not safe to cut open her womb and leave it exposed for 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. It is not safe to do that. The abortion, if that's all that mattered, was her safety, could have been done another way without cutting her open at all. Right. So I don't know what went on there.
No. No. And those are just a few examples. I mean, there's a way. I mean, this has been going on for decades, as you pointed out, and it's just as you something you linked to yesterday. You said, I mean, it's like it's heavily ingrained in the scientific community that this research is needed, that it's it's necessary, it's good in their minds, and I guess that leads to the next question. What is beyond defunding Planned Parenthood and pointing out that this research is happening. What's our response? What's our next call? What can we do? Can we do anything?
Okay. I would say that the question is, what can I do? Each one of us needs to be asking, what can I do? And I think there needs to be, from all of us, a public outcry. That's the only thing that gets this kind of stuff to stop, is that the public has to reject it. The public has to make it so that those researchers are not applauded for doing this anymore. And, it takes each one of us, me, you, and all the other people, to speak up against it, to say, I don't want this in our culture. I'm not going to stand for this. Because otherwise, they're just going to keep doing what they've been doing for decades. They're just going to keep getting the tissues from the people that get it for them. They're going to keep publishing their work in the papers. But if there's a public outcry against it, the journals won't publish it, the government won't fund it, the private institutions won't fund it. It will be considered, it will be rejected by society. So that gets back to what the Center for Medical Research Progress is doing. It's very good that they're causing this public outcry, because that's what it's going to take.
Well, and then we can obviously have to pray that this on top of that, but definitely spread the word, and we're trying to do that. I'm glad you're doing your part in trying to do that. Any final thoughts? Anything else do you think you could?
No, that's all. Thank you so much, though. I appreciate talking to you, Chelsea.
All right. Well, thank you very much for everything you're doing. It was good to finally talk to you and see you in person, sort of.